5-minute internet research revealed that this document that he submitted to INEC was sourced from an online forgery service called diplomamakers.com.
This David Hundeyin, this investigative journalist, this guy don't expose all the Tinubu secret. He talk say the Chicago certificate wey Tinubu submit give INEC, say na for fraudulent sites na they go download am. Say the thing no be from school, na no from the school, na they collect am. He say na from fraudulent website na they go download am, and say he call the name of the website. Say if make every Nigerian make dem go for that website, say they go see exactly the certificate wey Tinubu give INEC. Say na from fraudulent website na they go download am from, and he know the website, he drop the details. Man, I watch even read the end. See the way the guy take dey expose Tinubu, they open all the APC nyash, everything, he don expose them finish. Watch the video, let me share am abeg.
The All Progressives Congress Presidential Campaign Council's Director of Media and Publicity, Mr. Bayo Ononuga, and Advisor Media and Strategic Communication, Mr. Dele Alake, have attempted to silence independent media, as well as bully, intimidate the free media ahead of the 2023 general elections. The All Progressive Congress, during its opposition years, utilized the media to tackle the past Goodluck Jonathan administration and fiercely participated in media discourse, but is now at war with the media as he tries to shield his presidential candidate, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, from scrutiny, even though he clearly has all kinds of questions to answer. The question now is, what has changed in their relationship with the media, and why have they all of a sudden resorted to labeling, blackmail, and branding everything that will not bow to their party's narratives as fake news? Joining us now to discuss this is David Hundeyin, an investigative journalist, and Agba Jalingo, a Nigerian journalist and activist. Gentlemen, welcome to the morning show.
Thank you.
Well, the introduction, yes, thank you. The introduction already says it all. This ongoing attack on independent media by the APC Presidential Campaign Council, specifically Mr. Dele Alake and Mr. Bayo Ononuga, although they claim to be speaking on behalf of everybody within that party. Let me start with you, David Hundeyin, and then Agba Jalingo will also state his observations.
Right. So I've had this conversation a number of times with people who are in and around the APC presidential campaign regarding why they have such a combative posture toward all forms of independent media, being that in 2014 and 2015, when they were making a successful bid for power as an opposition party at the time, they leveraged very heavily on these very spaces to achieve what they achieved in 2015, which was unseating an incumbent president for the first time in Nigeria's history. And I think we all agreed to an extent that maybe, to all intents and purposes, that was a good thing. That was a sign that democracy was being deepened. The fact that an opposition party was able to essentially carry out a guerrilla media campaign and nobody went to jail for it. I personally think that a lot of ethical lines were crossed, but nobody really got into trouble for it. The idea at the time was that, well, there's press freedom in Nigeria. The Nigerian government isn't going to come down on you for practicing journalism, however way you practice it. So it's an open sky. Everyone can do as they please, as long as they're not, outrightly breaking the law. And I thought that was a good thing. So why is it that now, when the exact same thing is taking place, these people feel so threatened? And I've put this question to several people in and around the campaign, and I'm yet to get a satisfactory answer. The only indication that I get from people that I've had this conversation with is that they are simply frightened of having what they did in 2014 and 2015 done to them. And essentially, this all boils down to a fear of losing power. Essentially, if you have a free and independent media that is reporting on stories that you don't want to be reported, or that is reporting them in a way that you don't want them to be reported, then it somehow threatens your base. So essentially, this all comes down to the basic assumption on the part of the APC itself and the people from the APC campaign themselves that they don't believe that they have actually done enough to deserve re-election. That the incumbent party is not confident in its own record. So it feels as if the only way that it can win this conversation and win the election in 2023 is by bullying everyone in its way and doing things that even the past administration didn't do when these guys were in opposition. And that's where I have a serious problem, because this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We all witnessed what was done in 2014 and 2015. I worked in the marketing industry at the time, so I had a front row seat to see what was done in media, in advertising, in PR, in experiential marketing, all sorts of things that were done by the then opposition. I mean, at the time, I remember we had, to the extent of there being satirical TV shows, and cartoon shows, puppet shows, ridiculing the then president. Nobody got into trouble for that. There was no furious press release coming out from the presidency or from the PDP campaign then having a go at anyone for essentially practicing some form of independent journalism. Everybody was free to do what they wanted to do. And I think we all agreed that this was some kind of expression of the deepening of democracy. I know you yourself were actually part of that administration at the time. And as I recall, even though you had a series of, backs and forths with the then opposition, it never got to the point of actually telling them, stop doing your job, or you trying to dictate to them how they should do their job. Because at the end of the day, journalism is a very subjective thing. People practice journalism in the way that they see fit. There is no universal standard for what constitutes journalism. So I find it very funny. And I think it's also a self-indictment on the part of the APC's presidential campaign that they feel that the existence of independent media that is not under their control, and the desire of such media platforms to simply ask questions of their candidates somehow is a threat to them, that they have to come out with all this fire and fury, sending out myriad statements, leveraging all their media assets, newspapers, TV stations, to pump out this narrative that some set of people are somehow having a go at our candidates for some nefarious reasons or something. Meanwhile, all anyone wants to know is, can your candidate please come and present himself to the people that he intends to govern, that he wants to govern? Can he answer these questions? Because at the end of the day, your candidate is not applying to become the president of the APC or to become the president of Dele Alake and Bayo Ononuga. Your president is applying to become the president of Nigeria, which means everyone in Nigeria, including those of us having this conversation. So if he's going to be our president, whether or not we even vote for him, assuming he wins the election, then that means that we have every right to ask certain questions. That means we have every right to demand, not ask, demand that he presents himself to answer questions. He presents himself for scrutiny. That's a normal thing. So I think it's only in Nigeria that I've seen it where a job seeker or people speaking on behalf of a job seeker are angry that the employers are asking the job seeker to come for an interview.
Okay. Agbajalingo, over to you.
Well, I want to add to what David said by saying that even in 2019, while we were preparing for the presidential elections, I remember very vividly on one of the TV stations here where Mr. Dele Alake also mentioned that President Buhari then was not going to participate in the presidential debate. And when I saw him repeating it the second time, I started to wonder at what point Mr. Dele, whether he was speaking as a journalist or because I know that he's a competitor in this industry. On paper, it is assumed that he's the owner of one of the sister stations. And for a competitor to sit down and begin to make those kind of assertions that he made me very, 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 very worried. And Nigerians that are still pandering to that kind of bad behavior are only feathering the nest of birds that will soon begin to haunt us. These are very senior journalists and very senior colleagues in this industry that somebody would have expected that naturally they will find a middle ground and make the environment more conducive for the free press to thrive in. On occasions like this, I saw the last time that Trump decided to drive a reporter out of the White House. And the CNN chose to go to court. While they were in court, even Fox that was supporting Trump had to go join CNN in court to say, no, sir, we are not going to allow you to encroach into our turf. This is the media. There have been reporters in the White House before all of us were born, including you, Trump. So we will not allow you to encroach into our turf. That is the kind of attitude that I was expecting from people like Dele Alake and Bayo. Not to see respected people like this working very assiduously to see how they will continue to suffocate the media space. It is rather very, very disappointing. I am a victim of this kind of attitude where people feel that the press should not talk. So every time I get very emotional and tingly when people begin to make this kind of efforts. Two judges in England this year gave a judgment in court saying that if our freedom of speech includes only saying nice things, then there is no need for it. As a matter of fact, they said that the freedom of speech includes insulting the other person. And if you are not angry, if you are not happy about it, you find your way to the court, not to try to suffocate people and gag people from talking. If we allow this kind of attitude, then people like us will be bundled up again one of these days and thrown in one place that will be forgotten in Cross River State. I think that the media, in whatever shade, whether you like what they are doing or not, should be allowed to operate without any kind of manacles that we are seeing some people try to throw at us 20-something years after we got democracy. These people have also been victims of this kind of practice in the past. And for them to come up at this point to begin to pander to sentiments that we thought we had left behind over 2 decades ago is not a good example for those of us who are coming up on the job. These are examples, and I think that this bad behavior should stop. And very, very soon too.
All right, thank you, Agba and David. And you've used terms that I think we have to zero in terms of bad behavior and people getting used to or pandering to this bad behavior. And thank you, Agba, for pointing to the fact that you yourself have been a victim of this, where you were victimized for a publication you had made, and you were actually you were taken in, and for over about 197 days you were away.
6 months.
6 months you were away. Now, I'd like you to speak to that, especially as with regards to the effect of these kinds of behavior, which some might term as draconian against, and even illegal against journalists, when things that don't seem very pleasant are printed or are published, and the effect on the democratic process of Nigeria. For David, I'd like you to speak to, still on bad behavior. It seems like a number of Nigerians have gotten used to it. Because if you look at some feedback online, you see some people actually defending the actions of the APC and the candidates as well as spokespersons as to, oh, they don't have to present themselves. Why do they need to present themselves? They are being victimized and so on. What is the importance of the media holding power to, holding power to authority, holding power to scrutiny, and asking them to present themselves to respond to questions? I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I think it's because Nigerians have continued to reward this kind of attitude since 1999. Like, if you go down memory lane, in 1999, President Obasanjo refused to attend presidential debates. He eventually won the election. 2003, the same thing happened. He said he wasn't going to debate. He won the election. President Jonathan also avoided one of the debates in preference for another. He also won the election. And Buhari came again and also decided that he wasn't going to participate in the campaigns. He won the elections. Maybe they are seeing it as a pattern for them that we ignore them. That is not how to win elections. If you have enough money to share for people, they will always go to the booth and vote for you. But I think we need to begin to look at the morality, the suitability, and of a political debate. Since the 1960 famous debate between Nixon and JF Kennedy, till today, I think that has, in some countries, it has even been given legislative backing for people to make sure that whoever is asking for that top job comes to face the employers to ask them questions. And so whoever is still working against this kind of practice in Nigeria, I think should be considered as an enemy of democracy. Because if that is the case elsewhere, then Trump would have arrested everybody in CNN and locked them up because of the way they were dogging after his heels every other morning. The worst he could do, okay, he kept calling them fake news until he left power. But for people who I sincerely consider as very respected members of this particular industry to do this, I personally feel offended because I saw even journalists in Cross River when I was arrested. The NUJ in Cross River, as a matter of fact, wrote a statement and said, I am not a journalist. They wrote a statement and said, Agba Jalingo is not a journalist until the National Secretariat had to interfere. And we have this kind of colleagues in every newsroom, in every boardroom of every media organizations, trying to suffocate creativity, trying to suffocate free speech. And we should stop tolerating this kind of attitude. Nigerians should stop continuing to feed this kind of attitude in this country. If we continue like this, both democracy and the media is not going to grow. People do not have any obligation to say nice things to you. People do not have any obligation to say what you like, particularly when they are sitting on a microphone. If there's anything they are saying that you don't like, the courts are there for you to go and report them. And I think that the courts have been doing quite well. It was a judge that sent me out of jail when some people felt what I was saying wasn't sounding nice to them. What happened to the courts? I am surprised to see editors or what do I call them? Big men in another media organization sitting down and trying to determine who sits on the other microphone to speak. For me, it's very, very embarrassing and quite very, very offensive. And that is an attitude that we should rise up en masse and work against, so that young people who want to come into the profession can continue to have the courage and the audacity to continue to open up what is wrong with society. I feel personally offended about this development, and I can't help but say it in this manner.
Thanks, David.
The only thing that I'll add to what Agba has said, because he has pretty much said it all, but what I'll just add to that is that the reason it seems as if a number of Nigerians don't really understand the severity of the situation and just how dangerous it is for journalists, supposed journalists who are linked to power, who are linked to a ruling entity, coming out with these sorts of pronouncements and this sort of posture. And the reason that the number of Nigerians don't seem to understand the danger here is that you have to bear in mind that democracy in Nigeria really is still quite young. Democracy came back in 1999, so we're about 23 years into our latest democratic iteration in Nigeria. So basically, somebody who is 50 years old in Nigeria statistically has lived more of his life under a military dictatorship than under a democracy. So what would that person actually know about democracy? So I believe part of this, there's also a demographic issue involved. The older generation, specifically from Gen X and above, genuinely doesn't really understand, by and large, the importance of, as Agba said, being able to say things whether or not somebody else likes it. Because the norm under the military administrations, the successive military administrations, starting from Yakubu Gowon through Murtala Mohammed, then Olusegun Obasanjo, Muhammadu Buhari, Ibrahim Babangida, Sani Abacha especially, the norm throughout all these administrations was that if, as a journalist or as an editor, as a media practitioner, you said or you broadcast anything the government didn't like, something would happen to you. So it was under those administrations that we had journalists receiving letter bombs and dying. It was under those administrations that we had armed men storming into newsrooms and pointing guns at journalists and seizing newspapers and all sorts of crazy things like that. So that's what a lot of Nigerians have been used to. So, and then you also have to bear in mind that there wasn't actually a successful anti-dictatorship struggle in Nigeria. There wasn't actually a successful pro-democracy struggle in Nigeria. It just so happened that Abacha died, which we didn't really have anything to do with. So the return of democracy was almost like an accidental thing. So that consciousness of what democracy is and the fact that everyone is entitled to certain freedoms, entitled, not privileged, entitled, that these are constitutional, basic human and constitutional rights that everyone has. I don't think that understanding has really percolated through a lot of the older generation. Maybe a lot of those born after 1999 are more likely, because of exposure to the internet and the world outside, are more likely to understand the importance of free speech and things like that. But a lot of the older generation who was raised in a time when platforms like Arise TV weren't even allowed to exist, because the private sector wasn't even allowed to take part in broadcasting, for example. To those people, I guess having an authoritarian posturing by people in power is not that alarming because they are already used to it. But to people like us who have spent most of our lives statistically under the democratic dispensation, and we can see very clearly the sort of backsliding that Nigeria has been recording, especially over the past 7 years, where if you check the global press freedom ranking, between 2015 and now, Nigeria has slipped almost 20 places, right? So Nigeria is now behind, some, free speech luminaries like Burkina Faso and Myanmar. That's where Nigeria is right now. So for those of us who can see very clearly that we're regressing to, what we think of as the bad old days, we are alarmed by it, and that's why we are raising the alarm. Not everybody has that same mindset, though, which is unfortunate. But I think that's a demographic issue, and I also think that, statistically, Nigeria, something like 60% of Nigeria's population is under the age of 35. So I think this is a problem that will be solved by time.
Okay. Okay, David, I mean, you said something that we just, slipped into democracy. Wouldn't some Nadeko people, claw back at you and say,
I immediately had the
that is, no, it's because of the work people like Nadeko and some other people that actually fought, and died, for that democracy and their memories live on. But let us put the issues on the front burner. What are these issues that certain people don't want to hear? You did extensive work on the drug issue. Can you talk to us about that? The certificate issue, Chicago University even talked about a case that Enahoro Eba will be filing, at the Abuja court, which we know that he has filed. Tell us all of those issues. And, because all these issues people say speak to characters, tell us about all those investigative work you did do and you did put out there. And for you, Agba, I want you to speak through the connivance of other media because of their own gains in all of this matter. The fact that, as you in your own case, some people came out, probably they were coward or probably they were given some pecuniary, gains, came out to say that you're not a journalist. The fact that it is the same other media journalists in Nigeria that are so quick to throw other journalists under the bus because of what they're going to gain, and the blue on blue fight, sort of to use that word, continues, So David, you start first, and Agba, I want you to speak through that.
So there are basically two stories in one here. The first is a story about the drug trafficking indictments that the candidates of the All Progressives Congress had in 1993. And as I've appeared on this show before to speak about this case, anyone who hasn't read the case files can easily Google them and find them. They are everywhere now. These case files have been sourced from the U.S. District Courts of Eastern District of Illinois, the Northern District of Illinois Eastern Division. And essentially, you have this fellow, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was identified by IRS Investigative Special Agent Moss as a bagman, that's a money launderer working on behalf of a drug ring that was trafficking heroin in Chicago. And basically, this indictment, which has been on public record since 1993, for whatever reason, this story hasn't properly been told the way it was meant to be told. It's sort of become like a rumored kind of thing. So in the lead up to this election, I decided that I wanted to take this on. That you can't have a story potentially about somebody who has a chance of becoming Nigeria's next president being linked to drug trafficking, and it's just relegated to the realm of like social media rumors and stuff you see on blog pages on Instagram and things like that. So I dug into it, and the information it's visible to the blind and audible to the deaf, right? That this fellow was involved in drug trafficking. And this is not an allegation. This is not a claim. This is a documented fact, right? There are legal documents backing this up, right? This guy forfeited $460,000 of funds that were, I quote, proceeds of narcotics trafficking. This is on record. So I don't know, possibly because it's been 29 years since this thing happened, and as we tend to do in Nigeria, we tend to think that justice has an expiry date. So because this thing happened 29 years ago and he has been able to get away with it, he became a governor, he governed for 2 terms, has been a political operator, he was elected as a senator in 1992 as well. So basically he got away with it all the time. So the posturing from the camp seems to be that, well, this is already dead and buried, so why are you resurrecting this now? So why are you asking this question? And I think that's a ridiculous position to take because, as I've said earlier, Bola Tinubu is not applying to be president of Lagos or president of APC or president of Dele Alake and Bayo Onanuga. Bola Ahmed Tinubu is applying to be my president too. And your president, everybody's president who carries a Nigerian passport. So, of course, he has to answer this question that were you or were you not linked with drug trafficking? And if you claim that you weren't, well, here's the evidence, unimpeachable evidence that you were. So what do you have to say for that? Obviously, he doesn't want to answer that question. He doesn't want to present himself for that kind of type of question, because obviously he doesn't have anything with which to defend himself. He's as guilty as sin. That's very obvious. And then the second story, which I did, which was a separate story, but also linked to that, was a story about perjury. Now, on his INEC EC9 affidavit, he made several claims. He claimed that the date of birth he claimed on his INEC EC9 was a different date of birth to that which he has used in other places. So essentially what happened was the lawyer that he mentioned, Mike Enahoreba, he actually took INEC to court earlier in the year, I think in August, when INEC refused to make Bola Ahmed Tinubu's EC9 form public, and he won the case. INEC released the EC9 form to him. So then he contacted a law firm in Chicago, Leahy, Eisenberg, and Franco, to essentially investigate some of these claims that were made by Bola Ahmed Tinubu about his history in the US. So subpoenas were sent to Chicago State University, Richard Daley College, Deloitte, where he claimed to have worked, and Anderson Tax, because he claimed to have worked at Arthur Anderson at some point too. And the results that came back from these institutions proved that the claims he made on his INEC EC9, and some of the documents he submitted on his INEC EC9, were completely false. So, for example, the subpoena that went out to Chicago State University, the lawyer asked for all records regarding Bola Ahmed Tinubu that Chicago State University had, and they responded with the records he used to gain admission to Chicago State University, where he stated that he went to a secondary school called Government College Lagos, and he graduated in 1970. Well, it just so happens that Government College Lagos started in 1974. So clearly he couldn't have graduated in 1970 because it didn't exist. The degree certificate that was provided by the university, which was an exact reprint of the original certificate that was issued to a certain Bola A. Tinubu in 1979, was a completely different document to that which is submitted to INEC. Different font, different wording, different signatures, and different dates. And then what, in my opinion, the craziest thing of all was that a very simple, some very 5-minute internet research revealed that this document that he submitted to INEC was sourced from an online forgery service called diplomamakers.com. So literally, if you go to the Pinterest the repository of this website, diplomamakers.com, you will literally see a template for a Chicago State University fake degree certificate that is identical to what he submitted to INEC. The same grammatical errors on that certificate with what he submitted to INEC. So essentially, this guy or somebody working for him went to a service that produces fake certificates, diploma-makers.com, right? Got a fake certificate from there and submitted it to INEC. So the question is why? The answer to that may be answered by some of the other records that were obtained from Chicago State University. Now, one of the records that was obtained was a transcript from Richard Daley College, which was used to gain admission. And on that transcript, it was stated that the person known as Bola A. Tinubu that was given admission to Chicago State University, the sex of that person was female. So which essentially means that the person parading himself as Bola Ahmed Tinubu today and the person who got admission to Chicago State University as Bola A. Tinubu are in fact not the same person. That person also claimed to have a different nationality. That person claimed to be Black American. Tinubu on his INEC EC9 claimed that he has no nationality except Nigerian. So there are so many questions to answer. There's the basic issue of perjury, which, by the way, is a criminal offense. You can go to jail for that. There's the issue of falsification of documents, forgery. There's the issue of identity theft. There's the issue of non-declaration of supplementary nationality. And then there's the issue of the false claims of having gone to Government College Lagos, which didn't exist when he came to graduate. And just to quickly close on this, the subpoena that went out to Deloitte, the response that came back simply said, we do not know this person. This person has never worked for us. We have no record here. So if you recall, and let me just quickly close with this, his most recent media appearance, where he was asked, how did he make your money? All of a sudden, he made no reference to Deloitte this time around, which is a story has been shopping around for decades. These are questions.
All right, David, thank you so much for putting the issues out there, because we deal with the issues. And I'm sure his campaign council will react to all of this that you've put down. They're going to make their own robust reaction as right of reply. Agba, the question I asked you.
Yeah, in the press today, I think there's a hunting expedition. There are some people who feel like the adjutants and the superintendents of the industry. And once you are not bowing to their line, you are either considered not to be a journalist or you are considered incompetent, because they feel that they are the foundation of this particular profession in Nigeria. But that is expected, because it's not only happening in journalism, it's part of the professional politics that you face in every office out there. People don't just like some others when they are beginning to make headlines or getting some popularity that they don't have. They come after you and begin to question your credibility, not because they think that what you are doing is wrong, but just deliberately because they want to pull you down. It is not a new thing. Even from the time of Jesus, they have to look for one of you. It is the journalists that those who are looking for you will use to come after you. Most of the people that they have used to come and arrest me were my colleagues. They're the first persons that they will reach out to and ask them when you think he can be home, when you think he can be in the newsroom, when you think he can be on his laptop. If it's not people as close to you like that, they will not be able to get you. But on the whole, I think that as the debate about professionalizing this job goes on, it is important that colleagues begin to close ranks. Most of the media organizations in Nigeria are owned by politicians. And if those of us who are professionals who work for them are also unable to stick ourselves together and defend ourselves as well as the profession, ultimately, the politicians will just turn us to their tools, use us for as much as they want, and then when we get old, we walk out of the newsroom and return home empty and wretched, while they continue stealing the resources of the country and sending their own children overseas. We mostly need to develop our profession, defend ourselves, defend the newsrooms, not just the interests of the politicians. And until we do that, the profession will continue to face this kind of onslaught that is facing from the politicians. They will steal money, go and buy the cameras and the printers and put them together, then bring us and use us as tools. When they are tired of us, they push us away, because they know they can always use us against ourselves. But that is a point of reflection for us moving forward.
All right, Dr. Matthew.
Okay, there's a red herring that is being bandied around in a very emotional and unintelligent manner, which is that journalists must not go near politics, or that journalists, there's something called that journalist who must not have any political beliefs or political choices. Is that really the case? Because if you look in the US, you have a long list of journalists who have been in politics and who are in journalism, or who have been in journalism who have gone into politics. And you have a long list also in India, you know. But here you hear people who say, oh, that journalist is biased. That journalist is a member of so party. Can we possibly have that mongrel that is a journalist that has no idea of politics? Let me start with you, David.
As you've rightfully described it, that's a red herring. Because first of all, if we're being truthful, there's no such thing as a human being that doesn't have a political preference or some sort of beliefs or ideals that they adhere to. No human being is an abstraction. So the fact of being a journalist doesn't somehow turn someone into this apolitical abstraction whose job is just to robotically show this mythical thing called both sides of the story. That's not how real life works. Everybody has a preference. As you rightfully referenced, in the US, for example, journalists in the US actually openly state their political preferences. So you will know, for example, that a journalist who works at MSNBC or at CNN, there's a 99% probability that you're never going to see that journalist working for Fox News later on. You know why? In the UK, a journalist that works for ITN, you're probably never going to see them working for GB News. You know why? Like, these things are very clearly stated, and I think that's actually honest, right? People should actually know where you stand. So what I think is very very hypocritical, and I would actually use the word disgusting, is when people who not only have a political preference but actually hold political office, you know, within political campaign structures. People like Bayo Ononuga, who, he's a media practitioner. He owns a publishing house, a newspaper. He's also a journalist, supposedly a senior journalist. And he actually has a position, an official position in the APC presidential campaign committee, and this person will then come out and say, this other journalist is politically biased. This other journalist has expressed a political preference or has expressed a public opinion. Therefore, this journalist's position isn't valid. This journalist's work as a whole isn't valid because he has expressed some sort of position on something. Meanwhile, his own work is supposed to remain valid, right? No one is going to come out and say that PM News is not a valid publication because it happens to be co-founded and run by Bayo Ononuga. No one is going to say that. It's still a journalistic publication, like it or not. But somehow these standards only work in one direction. They don't work both ways. So I'm going to set these arbitrary standards, which are based on absolutely nothing for you, right? And I'm going to attempt to sort of set the narrative for you and fix these parameters within which you can operate in. Nobody gave me that power. Like, there was no meeting where it was decided that I am the gatekeeper. I'm the one who gets to make these decisions for anybody. I've just woken up on some side of my bed and arrogated this power to myself, and I've opened my mouth and I've started making these pronouncements. But you are not allowed to use the same standards on me because somehow I am above you. Somehow, as some sort of senior, journalist of the realm, these standards do not need to apply to me. I am special. I have a big problem with that, right? Because at the end of the day, what is journalism? The basic essence of journalism or the fourth estate is to tell stories that hopefully hold power accountable, right? That's essentially what I think when you come into the profession, that's what you are essentially trying to do if you are mission-driven, if you are purpose-driven. So if in the process of doing that, you have some sort of political affiliation that you think will help the cause of the mission that you're trying to accomplish, or you have some sort of political preference, or you express some sort of political preference, I don't see what that has to do with the validity of your work. I really don't see it, especially coming from people who because I'm going to keep on making reference to the 2012 to 2015 period. These are people who they when they were in opposition, they did things that I had never seen a media ecosystem in Nigeria do before. I've never seen things like that before. And again, I believe that a lot of ethical lines were crossed. I would go as far as to say a few legal lines were probably crossed as well. I saw these people do a lot of things, and I saw it firsthand because I worked in the same industry. We're in the same rooms. We had the discussion. I mean, I was nobody then, so I just happened to be a fly on the wall. But I saw these things firsthand. So seeing the same people coming out 7 years later and trying to present themselves as some sort of senior gatekeepers of the profession, and they are the ones who get to decide with which parameters everybody else gets to operate, and they are the arbiters of what journalistic morality and ethics are. I'm sorry, I do not believe that. I have a big problem with that. If anybody is going to lecture journalists about neutrality, about objectivity, it definitely shouldn't be the likes of Dede Alake and Bayo Ononuga.
Okay, Agbajalingo, we have just a few minutes to go.
I think neutrality is a utopia. Like David said, the journalist is not tabula rasa, and people should stop fooling us and fooling themselves, because that red herring is actually being bandied around by people who themselves hide their own political partisanship under the toga of professionalism. I hardly see any journalist or any media house, not only in Nigeria, but all over the world, that doesn't have a leaning. And as a matter of fact, media houses and journalists have moved beyond just taking a position. They now adopt candidates. We see CNN and New York Times adopting the past 3 presidential candidates for the Democratic Party in America openly and campaigning for them. We have also seen Fox doing that for the Conservatives in the past 3 or 4 elections, and nobody has. Even the British Prime Minister that handed over to Lizzie, Boris Johnson, while he was Prime Minister, he still kept a column on Daily Telegraph, and he was writing basically about the things that were happening in his government. The journalist is not a robot. So those who say these things should stop trying to roboticize the man who sits down. I cannot sit in front of a microphone and pretend that I am a robot. I have an opinion, and as an adult, I am going to express that opinion. I see journalism as a tool to change society. I do not see journalism as a neutral arbiter anywhere. If I must be on the microphone, my goal is to change society. I went beyond that and also stepped into politics. I'm the crossover state chairman of AAC, African Action Congress, and I did that consciously, knowing also that I am a journalist, because I'm not going to just sit back and watch politicians continue to do this. I have a duty to mold opinion, and I don't. If I see clearly that this politician is a criminal who is working to the detriment of our society, I should be able to use my independent opinion to tell the public that what this person is doing. I feel offended that one of the presidential candidates is refusing to come and talk to us. I feel very offended about that, and I cannot pretend to be objective about it, because that is not part of what we should call a democratic culture. And the earlier we begin to step out and do this, and tell the younger ones, even in the classroom, that journalism, neutrality in the newsroom is utopia. Anybody preaching that should come and prove it. Let us see. Every human being is subjective. Every human being has an interest. Let those who hide their own partisanship under professionalism stop preaching to us about neutrality. And if we can challenge ourselves, let them come and tell us where they have been neutral. Every news media organization in Nigeria have their leaning, they have where they are standing, and we all know. Nobody should stop. All of us should stop pretending to be holier than thou. We all know where every one of us stand, and they should stop suffocating and bullying the rest of us to follow their own rules.
Well, thank you very much, David Hundeyin. Thank you very much, Agba Jalingo, for joining us on the morning show today.
Freedom of speech now be one thing wey Nigeria no fit negotiate, because without freedom of speech, most of the things wey Nigerians don't know now, we no for no know am. Most of the secrets wey they don dey leak now, they will for no know. Many things wey dey happen for this election wey don make us even know how our government take dey carry our money, all the whole people wey dey serve for public office, how they don dey carry our money, na because of freedom of speech. If we lose am, we know, in short, na the worst thing will happen to us be that. And now, wey we dey careful of candidates wey dey desperate, wey we say dem dey ready to silence the media, wey no wan make the media dey report some things about them. We need to dey very, very careful and very conscious about these people, because our freedom dey very, very important. No, the kind people wey go come now come shut down Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter and all of that. Say people no call dey talk. Na dem go be the worst wey Nigeria go get. See, una know wetin happen when dem ban Twitter. Now know how many people say that they do business for Twitter, people wey dey do business, wey dey survive through Facebook, survive through all these social media platforms. If dem shut all these things, e no go funny o. So we need to dey express ourselves, and we need that freedom. So anybody wey dey can campaign, wey dey contest, need to guarantee us of our freedom of speech, freedom of expression. We no fit joke with that one. Nigerians, may na dey wise.